Hello, Scrolls fans, and welcome to a very special episode of Heart of Scrolls. Today, I've got a number of Badgers on with me to chat about the major news that we've gotten over the last week. There's been a ton of information brought on by Mojang, including the first hint of when this game is actually going to release to the general public. So I'm very excited about the show. We're going to talk all about what we think of this big release news, and then we're going to go into the second major change that we've seen this week, the tweaks to Wild on the test server. I am very, very excited about that change myself, but some of us have some concerns about how things might work. So we'll talk about that in the second half of the show. So without further ado, I will introduce my guests. We are very happy to welcome back to the show after a long hiatus, the leader of the Badger Guild, Magpieman. Welcome to the show, Magpieman.
Thanks for having me back.
And then we also have sysp joining us. Sysp, of course, had experience in the alpha to beta rollover a little over a year ago, so we'll lean on his expertise when we talk about the upcoming release. Welcome back, Sysp.
Thanks for making me sound really old.
You are amazing and old. It's a good combination. And then, of course, we have DaOvalord back on the show. DaOvalord is one of our favorite guests, and unfortunately, he may not be able to join us too much in the future, so we're happy to have him on for this show at least. Welcome back to the show, DaOvalord.
Thank you. Always fun to be here.
So, big news coming from Scrolls from Mojang. Scrolls will be released sometime by the end of August, or not. I'm sorry, by the end of autumn, by the end of fall. So, in gamer terms, I'm supposing that that might get delayed one more time. So, sometime in the next few months, Scrolls will be officially released. So, our first question to our panel here is: are we ready for this? Do you guys think Scrolls is ready?
Well, there's still some time to fix stuff, but at this moment, we're not even close to ready.
Not even close to ready. What makes you say that?
Okay, maybe we are a little close. I feel like there's two major things that need to be addressed. There's a shit ton of stuff that needs to be addressed, but the two major things is introduction, and that is my priority number one. We need a proper introduction into this game, and the other is a retention. The game needs to work on the retention for players.
I mean, we've got retention for the really top players because the ladder will just keep people interested. But anybody sort of mid, well, it's not that brilliant, but it's better than sort of after you've done the trials and stuff, maybe collected the whole all the library and that. There's not a lot else to do really.
That's kind of the end of the single player road.
Yeah. I mean, say, even for the veterans, many veterans actually don't really play too much. Many also have requested for things like season resets and stuff like that because they lose interest after a while and so on. So I'm saying even for the veterans, there is a retention issue there. But I will not really mark the veterans in the whole retention thing because we've been here for a while. It's kind of natural if we start to lose some interest in the game after we've been here for such a long time.
Yeah, I think it's the introduction really. I mean, I can just I'll just get this over with and talk about Magic now since
we'll bring it back up.
I'll always talk about Magic. People think we care about Hearthstone. It's Magic.
I'm actually gonna talk about it from a new player perspective now, which sounds weird because I started playing Magic in '94. But actually, it's I've been a little bit absent from Scrolls the last few weeks, and that's because I've been starting to play MTGO. That's Magic Online for the non-fluent ones. Which is basically the online client for paper Magic, and I have to say that I'm fairly accustomed to Magic and the systems and all of that, but MTGO, I think that's maybe the worst new player experience I've ever seen.
It's pretty bad.
It just dumps you in. It's not. You don't even you buy in and you get some stuff, but you have to collect it, and it's not very obvious where you need to collect it either. I mean, you need to find where your stuff that you paid for actually is, and then there's just no clues of what you're supposed to do. Are you supposed to be playing in limited events? Do you want to jump into constructed? Well, you don't have any decks, so maybe not constructed. It's pretty much a horrible experience in that. And I mean, I knew what it was after. I was really just looking for the the limited experience, but it was very, very strange.
Do you think any players that have never played Paper Magic before actually get on Magic Online and have a good experience and become regular players?
No, I think maybe that's what their other products are for, like Duels of the Planeswalkers and so on. Where they start off in a more like modern way of introduction, where you get a little bit of hand holding in the beginning and so on, and a clear direction of where you're supposed to be going and what your natural progression should be. But man, I was a little bit unprepared for it being so. I mean, I was just like, okay, straight to limited queue, and then the first thing they ask is like, okay, your stuff that you bought so far, not really important enough. I mean, you need to cash out more money if you want to play limited.
Right.
I'm like, okay, sure, where's my credit card? And it's like just accepting that this is the fact.
Yeah.
But if I was a completely new player, it was like, okay, so I can't even play now.
Yeah.
They
So-
played the game.
So we can take lessons from that and think about what Scrolls introduction is. And I feel like we were that way for the better part of a year. Just you dumped onto this main screen, you do the first tutorial, and then you just kind of, okay, now what? And they're getting better at that, but you guys feel like we just need a lot more direction?
We need a lot more directions.
Yeah,
Some sort of campaign or some sort of single player
Yeah.
guided experience. I mean, we've got the trials, but
given that there's no paper scrolls that are leading you into it, and you played it for 18 years to go online, I mean, you need to be held from the beginning there, and that's not what you're getting, I think, at the moment. I mean, you get some direction, but they've worked on it, but probably if they're supposed to be doing anything for like the future of the game, there always needs to be new blood going in, because regardless of how good the game is, people are gonna drop off.
Right.
yeah.
It's just a fact of nature, and if the starting player program isn't good enough to keep them interested and get them over the hump, it's eventually gonna just trickle down and die out. So it's really important. And as Oler said earlier, I mean, I think that it's really important how the first wave gets treated here also, that we are actually taking care of them properly, because that's probably gonna be the biggest wave that's gonna hit for the official release. After that, it's gonna be maybe a couple of bigger waves after announcements and so on. But that's the major one that needs to be taken care of properly, and that's probably no second chances on that one.
No second chances is something I key in on, and I feel like that's the community's general feel, is we've got one swing at the fences for this, and we need to hit it. Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But it's not just Scrolls, it's Mojang as a whole. I mean, if they've got Minecraft as such a big success, if their second game's seen as a flop, then it's going to look quite bad on them, really. Sort of a one-game wonder.
Right. And what a one game. Obviously the number one selling game ever, but if they can't replicate anywhere near that success with their second attempt.
Well, to be fair, I would say Scrolls has done fairly successful for what you can like expect from a game developer trying to aim after Minecraft. That is just unreasonable.
Yeah, good point.
It's unreasonable for even Blizzard. Like it's unreasonable for Valve. It's unreasonable for many. So I will not really say that necessarily. However, if I'm gonna jump back to the whole what I wanted to see with the whole introduction thing, is that I was really hyped for the campaign, because I was hoping the campaign would be a way to introduce the players, the new players, following things. One, they get to learn the mechanics of the game, which is always an issue, and also the rules of the game is very complicated, to put it mildly. So that is also a good way to learn how the rules work. Like seriously, many of us veterans don't understand the rules, and it's one of that is one of those things that they kind of need to patch up a bit, and then they would, and this is one of the more important parts. It would be a good way for them to see where they feel they belong. What do they want to play? What do they want to aim for? Do they want to go for growth? Do they want to go for energy? Like, what do they want to spend their gold in? And the campaign would be a perfect fit for this for them to get into the game, learn the mechanics, get to the starting gold without it being a drag. Just doing a bunch of AI and trials is a bit of a drag. This would be more fun, and they would start to see where they feel they belong.
Right.
Like, what do they want to play? But we're not gonna have a campaign before release, so okay.
Yeah, I was very surprised by that. I figured that's what they were waiting on.
So I was disappointed there, but okay, we can manage without. But if we're not gonna have a campaign, we need some kind of pop-ups in the game that is like, welcome to Scrolls. This is that. This is here. And we need some kind of further tutorial that actually explain a bit more about more of the rules in the game, and so on. And especially, this is a very common question that we get all the time on the forums, and that is, how should I spend my gold?
Right.
That's like always, and they need some kind of short guide there, like pop-ups and so on, that is just telling them how they can spend the gold and introduce them for like the black market and so on, and how that works. And so
it's a good point. I think maybe one thing they could aim for is something more of like civilization tutorials, sort of, where it overlays like playing tips, context based on where you're at. Like, oh, now you got your first settler. This is what you're doing with them. Oh, now you need to select technology. This is what you think of, and you can turn them off eventually when you're getting accustomed to them. And maybe there's something like that they can do. Like, okay, now it's your turn. You have creatures and scrolls. You're summoning creatures. Where should you put it, etc. I mean, you can just have layers and layers on that, and be contextual about it, and because the thing with the current tutorials are they're so simplistic, and you run through them so fast that it's like
they do a nice job of teaching one concept, but then there's so much more out there.
It's just scratching the surface, and I think that the academy helps a little bit, but you need to find it, and you need to read, and it's just more investment, and overlaying it into the UI instead might be much better for that. And that could be like you're doing proper matches and everything like that, but you're getting a little bit of hand holding there with your decisions. Like, don't forget to sack for scrolls. Like, you can sack for 2 cards, or but it's early in the game, so maybe you want to sack for resources instead, etc. So it's some kind of.
They have those like tips that come up when you're logging into the game, but I feel like them being actually in game would be a far more powerful use of that.
They're not. I mean, they're more like waiting screen tips, and that means that they are not contextual on when they're showing. I mean, it's hit or miss if that particular tip is going to help you or not. But if it was contextual instead, that it came up exactly at the right moment, and they could obviously trigger on those, then it could be, I think, more helpful with that. And somewhat alleviate the lack of a longer single player experience before you are released into the wild, so to speak.
Right. Magpie, did you have anything to add to that?
Well, yeah, it's just stuff like simple things to players who played it a long time, like scroll advantage and resource advantage. To a completely new player to any sort of card game, that's just a different language entirely, and sort of just how you get that advantage and win a game, because even spectating, you can't necessarily see how somebody gets ahead and wins the game, so just little things like that really make a world of difference, I think.
I think that's a great point, especially when our expected player base is going to be largely Minecraft fans or fans that are attracted to the Mojang name. Everybody knows how to play a first-person shooter or even a real-time strategy. Most people don't know how to play a trading card game well. So not only does Scrolls have to teach you how to play Scrolls, it's got to teach you how to play a trading card game. And that's kind of a difficult climb to make.
Yeah.
I feel like that's not your point here, so I'm not gonna jump too much on that. But let's not try to make it that the FPS and real-time strategy are easy to learn.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. But once you've played a first-person shooter, you understand you need to click on the thing so it dies. So at least you understand what to do to win.
Like to be honest, card game is not really that much more difficult. It's just that it's hard to get. It's hard to like master, as you say, and but that goes to many of the other ones. But we're not really gonna do comparison, champ or something.
Right.
No.
So we're
go
ahead.
Yeah, but they definitely. I think that if they want to spend any resources on improving stuff before release, I think that they definitely should look at the beginning. I feel like some of us are a special case. I mean, you said that. I mean, I've been around since alpha, and that obviously kept me interested. And it's usually that I'm focusing on like maybe 2 or 3 things that I get really into at one time. And for Scrolls to occupy one of those slots for at least 2 years is fairly. I mean, it's a long part. It's a percentage of my life now that I've been playing Scrolls. But so it's definitely there is something there. I mean, it's definitely an intellectual challenge. But I think that the middle to end game there on the maturity level as a player is there. I mean, if you're reaching that point, but it's the graduation from like the fledgling up until the intermediate. I think that needs work, not necessarily what happens thereafter, because then I think we can fill out some gaps there with like tournaments and guilds and separate ladders and challenges and whatnot.
Yeah.
I mean, some stuff that the community can contribute to, and the Reddit and everything like that, obviously, but which keeps you hooked there. But the early part, they don't even know that there's a community at that point. They need Mojang and the UI itself to speak to them, not the Scrolls.com page, not the Academy,
and not even General One.
No, not even General One, and or the Reddit or anything like that. So that they need to have. I mean, Scrolls Guide is bread and butter to us now. But new player, how are you finding that?
Yeah.
And if you're starting off on Scrolls fans, good luck to you, man.
Yeah.
So it's there's a step after that as well.
I mean, some sort of in-game guild support would be amazing, really, just to sort of push them in the direction of getting involved with other players, because that keeps you playing as just interacting with other people, really. So
yeah, I'm totally with that. Although I do not, I put that maybe not that highest priority, but I do put that as a good. It's one of those good suggestions in how you can deal with the retention issue with the game. As one of the solution for retention is making more social environment, so people are around just for the social experience. So they have something to do at the dead times, because there's always going to be dead times in games until like next set or whatever comes out. And then it's always good having people still stick around for whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they've been talking about with like war zones, for example, changes they can make that don't take a ton of dev time, but the output is a big payoff for that time spent. I feel like guild support and things like that kind of falls into that category where it's not a ton of work on their end and could have a decent payoff.
Yeah, I think it's smart use of resources. I think to do that kind of equation if they have a limited amount. I mean, given that they said themselves also that the waypoints took longer than they would like to. I mean, and they have to acknowledge the fact that obviously there is a strain on resources, and making the best of what they have is definitely a concern. I mean, at this point, if they want to put a release date to it, they probably need to weigh business value, and that's enjoyment also, of course, for the largest amount of people. Give and compare that to dev time invested. I think it's a smart way of thinking about it. And if they need to do like more heavy lifting, probably put it directly at a new player, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
So we agreed that there's quite a bit that needs to be addressed before release, at least ideally, especially with the new player experience.
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, I agree.
Oh, sorry. I misheard you. My fault. See, I'm going for my transition here. I feel like the rollover from alpha to beta was actually a huge success. I know it brought at least 3 of the 4 of us in. Sysp was already around, as well as obviously thousands and thousands of other players. And the game was a really big hit for at least a month or 2. So I feel like that was quite a success. Sysp, will you talk a little bit about what you feel made that such a success? What did they do right? Or was it just the YouTube video by, what's his name?
Total
Total
Biscuit.
Yeah, by Total Biscuit.
That did help. Let's be honest. But I think that the at that point it was at least at the maturity level that there was a balance, and they had gotten the main features in. I mean, you can argue now that maybe it was a little premature. You wanted to know what they did right. I think that what they did wrong, if I start there,
Sure.
the timing was a bit off. They put it out, and then the Swedish vacations hit, and we all know by now how Swedish vacations are.
Yeah.
It's like radio silence. So there wasn't there. It was a little bit unfortunate timing that they weren't around to take care of the game there. Maybe they could have parried a little bit there and acted fairly quickly on some stuff there in the beginning. But I mean, overall, the influxes was different with I think it was the first time we started to see, for instance, proper streaming and all of that. Before that, it was mostly, there was some tournaments, but they weren't usually streamed. And it coincided a bit with Twitch starting to make the scene as well, I think, and really ramping up. So that helped. Heart of Scrolls got started around then by Ice Cream as well. And then, I mean, there was all of a sudden there was content being produced. I mean, we had content in alpha, but I think it was definitely the influx of players there made it more worthwhile to release more content, like in articles and all that. I knew I wrote a lot more back then than I'm doing now, for instance. So I think it's definitely it was a major point there, and they had more vision than they had in early alpha. A lot of the creatures were changed throughout alpha and also in pre-alpha, and the game was fairly well balanced at that point. I know we definitely predicted wrong there. The people that were around before and after, we thought that we were gonna see all order all the time because that was the meta game before.
Yeah.
But throw enough people on it, and then we got the growth meta game right at the beginning of alpha. I mean, it turned out there was a builder that we had missed. So it was definitely an exciting time, I think, and they also had the marquee tournament there that Ice Cream hosted as well, with the invitation for real money, which was also a fairly big step, and one which hasn't been replicated so far now, the player base that dropped. But I think it's feasible that we can see that kind of investment after going from beta to live, that we can actually probably get some kind of sponsored tournament, maybe not from Modang. We don't know exactly what they stand on organized play yet, but there's definitely, if the numbers are good enough in the beginning, there could definitely be some kind of sponsored tournament, for instance, that will get enough proper production and streaming and prices that it could draw in some esports crowd as well. So it will be very interesting to see if that actually happens. But it's mostly a numbers game at that point. That was why it started to pop up around the transition from alpha to beta, and that can come around again, I think.
Okay.
So they had to put it to beta at some point, because at that point people were screaming for beta.
Yeah.
Since the alpha was closed. So there was definitely a huge interest in the beginning. We'll see how it goes this time. It's a little bit on the fence on exactly what the response is going to be.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we're going to have the big release event and then there's going to be crickets, or if we're going to have an influx of 7,000 new players or 20,000 new players, and that actually brings me to my next question. What would you guys consider a success for the Scrolls release?
I think it's feasible. Like, the sort of, for me, the dream scenario is to have around Dream is having like 5 million players, but
And it's the
that's
next
not
big
gonna
thing.
happen. But the realistic Dream scenario is probably around 2,000 players online at the same time. What we might more hit at the successful is having around above 1,000 players at the same time. And what works, but would be a shame if we get like 500 players at the same time. Below that, it's just a failure.
Yeah,
that's how I would say.
I'm pretty confident that when it hits live, we will get a huge influx. But it's all about how we retain it. Is more the question of whether it's successful or not. So, yeah, as DaOvalord said, if we can keep a good few thousand online at any one time, then I'd say it's fairly successful, yeah.
So we need to think about success not only 2 weeks after live, but obviously 2 months and then 6 months and then 8 months after live to continue having a healthy game.
Yeah, well, I mean, Mojang has the pay to play thing, so you have to pay to actually play the game unless you're gonna play the demo. So I mean, if 9 million buy the game and stop playing after an hour, it's still a success for Mojang.
This is true.
So it depends what you are looking for here.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit scary. I mean, most trading card games are you buy sets as you go. You are constantly investing more money, and that's the motivation for the company to keep producing really high quality content. That motivation really isn't there for Scrolls right now. So I'm not sure how Mojang sees it long term as a financial. I mean, they have to constantly bring in new players in order to make it work.
But I think it's probably not as bad as it sounds. I mean, that was one of the best things about Minecraft's business model was the pay up front. And that was actually what made it successful. That they kind of coined that whole thing also. That that you can get people to invest that early in the process, and that frees you up in some way as well. I mean, obviously, yes, it's limiting a bit. I mean, there's a reason why the new player experience, for instance, in League of Legends, is so well thought out. It's just because that at that point they haven't made any money off you, and they need to hook you. So they are like their business people are screaming at you screaming at the developers to hook you at that point and cater to you. And yeah, obviously if you're paying up front, there is definitely that chance that there is not as much invested into the actual gameplay itself. But really, I think that with what we have right now, I think we're already sort of disproving it that they're in it for that point, and that the huge cash reserves of Mojang is also helping it a bit, that they can invest in it a little bit differently. Because I don't think it's actually only that they're investing in Scrolls; they're also investing in their own will and motivation to produce a third game that is actually going to be anything commercially. Because I mean, given that Minecraft is a bit of a special case, Scrolls is the next player out. What happens if Scroll can't make any realistic money, or is it like a middling hit? Do they actually start to invest in another title again just because they like making games, or are they at that point
the Minecraft company?
Yeah, exactly. Going and devoting those resources instead into Minecraft, or maybe the spin-offs of that, or anything like that. But it's like, do they kind of retract their investment in that sense if they don't feel like the Scrolls is actually? I mean, it's not only that it's the monetary part, but it's also the value part. If they think that they're producing a bad game, the one that people don't like, why would they actually try to do a third one then and go it again? They might only do like indie titles at that point then, or like something else. I mean, they're not afraid to do like the smaller competition games and all of that. So
I mean, it's not just Mojang though. You've got the fans on the other side as well. I mean, if they lose faith in the company as a whole to produce decent games, if say Scrolls doesn't succeed and maybe the third game goes the same way, then people are going to lose faith in the company as a whole. You know, so it's pretty important.
So I wouldn't actually. There's been so many people saying that it's the free to play is the way to go for this game. I honestly believe that it isn't. I mean, given that there's so many people complaining also about the price tag, and for a game it's actually fairly low.
Yes.
I would say. I mean, if you have any kind of allowance, salary, or anything like that, it's not a huge investment compared to a AAA game that you're getting for your console, for instance. And the thing is that it's just that they if you go compared to any other trading card games that are free to play. I mean, if you're still it's going to try to still be playing it 2 years from now. I mean, if I played Magic Online for 2 years now straight, given the rate I'm burning through draft packs, I don't know. I need to get.
I mean, it's $15 a night for you to play.
Yeah. I was sick for 2 days and I drafted 15 times, and it was, I can tell you. I mean, given that you're getting some packs back, it's still like a fairly strange rate. So maybe in 2 days I spent like maybe $200 on the game.
Wow.
And I mean,
you're not alone.
No, and I think it's the thing that you can't sustain. You can't. That's only for a part of the crowd that are willing to invest that much in a TCG. So I think that the pay up front is actually a fairly good model that you can sustain of that for years and years. I mean, we don't think that for a seasoned player the goal isn't that much of an issue, and retaining scrolls. I mean, it's just. I think it's not the answer is not free to play. I think it's a good place where it's at business model wise. I think
because it's got the microtransactions as well with shards.
Yeah.
So if players want to do that, the option's there. So sort of win-win for everyone, I think.
Yeah.
Just gonna poke at the whole. I cannot really speak for Mojang, but I think Mojang kind of develops what they are passionate about developing, considering the little thing I've seen from Mojang, which is like how they done. I don't remember exactly. Cobalt was the name of the game. Like they do their Cobalt thing, and Notch has been doing that space whatever he's doing. It was some kind of early prototype alpha thing that he was running around with a space gun in kind of place. So I mean, I think Mojang likes to develop the games they want to develop. I think that's sort of their philosophy,
which should benefit us. So overall, I feel like we're cautiously optimistic about this release, maybe a little nervous that we're not quite ready yet. I mean, they do have a couple of months before release time, so maybe they've got something in the works that'll come out pretty quick or timed with the release, but
they can always delay it.
They can always delay it. That's
they seem
absolutely
to be good at
true.
doing that with Minecraft. So
very few games ever come out on time, so
they should delay it just before summer.
Just before summer, okay.
There you go. Give themselves plenty of time.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and move to the big news on the test server is the changes to Wild. We had a sort of surprise post. I'll back up a little bit. Ghostbomb made a great post on Reddit with his idea for what to do with the Wild, and then there's sort of a surprise post by Mons, the lead developer, on the subreddit with just a Google Docs of how are we going to address Wild? What are these different ideas? And solicited a lot of feedback, and then all of a sudden, boom, test server change. We've got a new idea. So now, rather than only having Wild limited to the lowest resource of all the resources you have in your deck, now you get to have it double of that resource. So the big news there is if you sacrifice for one resource in the off color, you can now go up to three cost cards in that color. So it's pretty darn easy to splash a large percentage of the card pool. Mm-hmm. So big deal. If this goes live, this is a big change. How do you guys feel about this addition to Wild?
I think trying different things. Can't complain about that, but it only really addresses one of the problems, and that's that Wild is a bit underpowered at the moment. The other issues that surround it don't seem to be fixed with what they've done. I mean, I still think there's a balancing issue, not only now but for future, in terms of they can't put removal in the game, like mass removal, because anything they put, Wild will just allow it to be put in multicolour decks and just gets abused at that point. So they're sort of limiting themselves from a design point of view.
by making multicolor so powerful.
Yeah, I mean, which is bad in a way because then aggro becomes so dominant and you can't get rid of it. And I don't know, not massively keen, but glad they're looking at different solutions.
Well, I'm also happy they addressed this because sure, this was not on my highest priority list for the release, but it was fairly high, and I actually think it's good. Although, as I said before, multi-resource deck is like a car. Multi-resource is like a car, and they want us to test these mechanics. The issue is just that we are testing now the engine. And for at least in my perspective, I think we have a good engine. The issue here is that we have no tires. So it's really difficult to test this car with the engine when we have no tires.
Guys, this car's not going anywhere. That's the problem.
But from what I can see, the engine seems fine. And what I'm referring here, there's a lot of components in multi-resource. We have the ramp cards. We have the synergy between the cards in each other. We have the whole balance aspect, and we have wild, and we have the tempo. And there's a lot of things going on in multi-resource. But at least in my opinion, I think this wild is actually good. It's in a good spot. What we need to address is the other components when it comes to the whole multi-resource thing.
So from an actual card design perspective.
Yeah. I think that the thing is that multi-resource has always been viable for control decks. I mean, that's been the case now for I don't know how long. We had control decks multi. Yeah, we had control decks already in alpha. Being multi-resource Go-Draw, for instance. There was also a GE deck that was fairly ridiculous at one point, and then some others. I mean, the thing is that they still haven't figured out the main part of, because I think one of the design goals that they have in multi-resource is not only allow multi-resource for control decks, but also for tempo decks and aggro decks. That they should also be able to build like that, and especially the tempo decks struggle mightily with the wild introduction. I tried to make it work now on test server, and it's the same issue again and again and again. The first 3 turns, you fall behind.
Yeah.
Compared to a mono resource deck, and then you need to do a big play to catch up. So you start off the game behind. If your game plan goes to plan, you start off behind. The thing is that it's just not enough at the moment with the synergies that we have, with the flexibility of being able to play multiple resources to allow for that to overcome the tools that they already have in a resource. Because at that point where you're starting to reach your stuff, where you're getting ahead again, they are up to like 5-6 resources in mono, and then they start having their own tempo plays.
Right.
You're running into their powerful stuff like Veteran. You're running into
the Witch Doctor on turn 6.
Yeah, you're running into Blessing of Haste with Focus on Relentless and all of that. I mean, you're basically hitting the wall of their big plays, and you are running into your like splashed tempo plays that are maybe more flexible and but usually actually a little bit of a power level thing as well, because it's really hard to actually build a deck multi-resource that is significantly more powerful scroll to scroll than a mono resource deck at the moment. And especially the thing is why control decks are working is because they get to do all of the synergistic plays. I mean, for instance, ED Control thrives of being able to combine easy access to curse with easy damage from growth, especially with Frostgale and Rangers, Bane and Ragged and whatnot. I mean, stuff that allows you to trigger it. And that is enough to be. Those templates are big enough to allow you to pull ahead again at that point. At least goes to parity, draws the game into a state where your late game catches up, and then you're more powerful in the late game. But for a tempo deck, I mean, if you start off like one tempo or one or two tempos down on the position already when you're starting, how are you supposed to be catching up? And they still haven't figured this out. And I don't know if we can do it either. I mean, now it's easier now with the wild system. Obviously, it was a buff, but it's still like the first 2 turns are exactly the same.
Yeah,
it's like you're playing one of the resources, you play the other, and then your 3rd turn is the same as it was before the change. So the first 3 turns play out exactly the same as before the.
No.
No.
I feel like you talked enough now. I felt like I felt early on I want to butt in because I'm not necessarily agreeing with you, but I let you talk there. Because I've actually, first of all, I will agree that we always see control decks. The issue here is with the control decks. We're always gonna see, as soon as multi-resource becomes more and more viable, we're gonna see more and more of control and removal decks because all of these ramp cards are essentially removals, and that is kind of an issue. But that is again with the whole component when it comes to the ramp cards and so on. But I will say, I actually think, for example, I've been playing around on the test server a order energy deck that is essentially 50-50 on the colors. You have 50 order and 50 energy. And although I'm feeling it's not as strong as the mono resource and so on, it definitely, with this new wild change, it do give them a run for the money. Sometimes I won, sometimes I barely lost. And the thing here is, it is because with this new wild change, before having two resources in a faction, you can't do much with that. You cannot make game-changing things really with your wing soldiers or your Ilmayer tribesmen, and well, maybe with the brave. But he's like one of the only guys you can maybe do something with. There's not many things you can do with two. But when you reach 3 is one of the key points. Now you're getting to the storm runners, you're getting to the skirmisher, you're getting to the canonetta, and so on. So what my deck very much consists of is it has good synergy with energy and order, because both has things that love damage amplifier, and both factions has a lot of damage amplifiers. As well, they have cooldown reduction. So with that, my deck becomes very consistent, because I have a lot of damage amplifiers, and I have a lot of things that like damage amplifiers, and I can do more flexible things with this than I could do in a mono one. And it is not exactly the same in the early turns as with the old wild, because now I can do 1/1 into different resources. This depends on what I have first. Sometimes I go very heavy on mono resource and then start dipping into other. So that depends on what I draw. But I can go 1/1, then I can go in a wild, and then I can go in the second wild. This is very good and very flexible for me, because this means I can use whatever free drop I need from whatever faction only after 4 sacrifices.
Yeah, no, I agree on that. The only thing I was saying was that the first 3 turns, exactly as you said, is exactly the same as before the change.
But that is why you kind of need some kind of good 1 and 2 drops to just have something out on the board early on to play something around with.
Definitely agree.
And yes, you get a little bit behind, but that should sort of be the drawback when you go multi-resource. It cannot just be overwhelming good. And the thing is, with the old, you would have to, in order to really get to this, you can always get 3 in each. You would have to go 2 order, 2 energy, and then 1 wild. Then you can you can start to play free drops in each of the factions. And this really becomes not as flexible, because you now have, for example, maybe you get some energy heavy thing, then you have just 2 orders sitting there doing nothing. Having more wild now, it's more flexible in how you can use it, how you can utilize it. So always use as much of your resources as possible in the turns you're playing. And if you at some point need go to like the 4-drop, doing a 4-drop thing, like I have burn, for example. Maybe I won't burn next one turn. Then I just can sacrifice for 1 energy that turn, and then I can easily use it, and so on. So it's actually really help out in the early tempo more than I think you give it credit for.
Yeah,
yes,
I think you might be right. I'm just going to, one short thing, I don't know if I talked enough, but I think that you're touching on a very important point, and that is resource utilization, which was one of the problems with when it was a little bit less powerful. And I agree that it's better at that now. In the tempo game, you can usually actually tell at the end there. I mean, if you do this experiment when you're playing a match next time, count how many resources you're using every turn and do the same thing for your opponent. And then at the end, when one player is winning, see who spent more resources. And most of the time, actually, the player that managed to play to utilize the resources best actually come out ahead, just because every point of resource gives you a little bit more power on the board. And that was one of the problems with the old system, that usually you had one of those like 1 or 2 resources unspent. So that's where you're also falling behind a bit.
And I'm not sure how you address that when you require paying the full, when every scroll costs all of one resource type. I just don't know how you address that, because if you don't have the perfect overlap of I have 6 growth and 3 order, having those exact costs in your hand is just so difficult to have. You're going to have wasted resources all the time without a colorless system of some sort.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't deny that it's fairly competitive now. My concern is always that we're going to have the issue of no matter what we do, there's going to be an abusable deck somewhere along the line with this sort of system. Because in effect, it is exactly the same as the old system. It's just a slight buff to it. It's the same mechanic, and I think the mechanic's wrong. I just don't think it works, because you're going to get removal, and then people are going to combine these removals together in all the factions. Or so you've got your curses in decay and you've got your removal in energy, and there's going to be abusable decks, and the only answer to that is to take out removal from the game, more or less. I mean,
but I don't think you're describing an abusable deck now. You're describing a control deck, and I don't think that we can have a game without control decks existing. I mean,
well, yes,
what
I think
kind of diversity is it if you can't remove stuff?
No, exactly. But if you have these control decks in multi-resource, I think they become like mono energy structure and decks that people just hate to play against, because it is just, they build their deck and it is just all removal with the 1 or 2 win conditions, and it's just.
But that's the thing there. Fun. I mean, I think that with enough scrolls being released, the saturation is going to be that there's going to be removal decks in mono resource anyways. I mean, you brought up mono energy structures. That's enough removal to fit the deck without dipping into a second resource. I don't necessarily think that the wild is the big issue there. It's just that I think that why we're seeing those control decks is just that they are enough powerful that they can be played on a ladder, whereas tempo decks falter off because they are, in most cases, inferior to their mono-colored options when it comes to, because they need to play a tempo game, and the mono resource decks are still
better at that.
I think.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, I don't think Wild's ever going to be that good at tempo compared with mono.
And I think that's precisely because it costs you basically 2 scrolls to go into your second resource, because you have to make that sacrifice into the second resource. And so in order to make up for that, you really need to have some sort of card advantage engine, and control decks can do that, but aggro decks just can't.
I actually think, first of all, I think the wild is not a slight buff. It's actually a heavy buff. I think once again, you're not really giving it enough credit. It deserves this buff. And then, but that is one for each own opinion. And then the whole control thing, I think the issue there lies very much in how the ramp cards, of course, ramp cards are good in multi-resource decks, and then having them all being so very removal of them gives that whole issue. And sure, but the whole, I'm more in the sysp place when it comes to this strategy with well, even if they are not removal, you can still play multi-resource decks where you aim to like get cards and remove and then get control, but at the same time feeling as long as that's balanced, that's okay having that kind of deck. So I'm not against that. I'm just against that pretty much it's always there because of how all the ramp is removal. But regarding this, to give an example how, because even in the deck I played, the Order Energy, definitely this whole needing a card advantage is sort of a issue. But that is where, for example, Smuggler and Burn really helps.
That's true.
As well, Automata Forge really helps. And I have some kind of cantrip in the deck when it comes to the order side, but it's mostly the energy side. I have this saving card thing. So you don't really need to depend on Fertile Soil and Oblivion Seekers to make these works. You don't need hardcore card advantage. You just need something to keep your cards coming. As things like Smuggler, Automata Forge, and so on, they do fine with this. So and especially Burn. Burn really helps keep you going. Just so you have something on the hand and keep on playing, even when you lost some of those extra cards early on. So I will say it's totally feasible, even without having to go hardcore card draw to make a multi-resource deck work.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely. I mean, it can work. There was when we had Pudding, for instance, I did build that energy order Pudding soft lock deck
That
where
was
you
fun.
we locked them with summons and higher smuggler and double state machine, and the rest of the deck is just putting a clock on them, so you know that you're finishing the game. So I mean, in certain metas, I mean, I think it's definitely viable. I mean, that deck was doing like, I mean, I don't think it went 10-2 versus Pudding or something like that, and that was pre-nerf. But it's just that it's hard to play that tempo game. And given that the scroll lends itself to tempo decks a lot, I mean that's the reason why we're seeing that so much on the ladder. I still have a very hard time believing that there's enough synergy between two resources that will overcome that deficit of being slightly less powerful in the few first turns than the mono resource deck, and then not just succumbing to being a little bit off when we're starting to reach parity and we're both playing out our hand, basically.
And we know we're concerned about the first turn advantage, but if you extend that first turn advantage and be an extra turn behind by playing wild.
And it's also introducing those clunky draws when you're in top deck mode and you are double dipping into two scrolls and you get unlucky.
Yeah.
It's a much higher percentage of that drawing the wrong combination at that point and not being able to fully utilize your hand there than in a mono resource deck. And it's a reason why when I was starting to tweak Goyos, for instance, what I ended up with was basically a mono growth deck, because it was more I mean, it was more efficient to reach 4 resources in growth and just play out your hand than to reach 4 resources between order and growth and play it out. So it is tough to solve that problem, and I think that the wild is definitely more powerful with the buff. Of course, it's a straight buff, but it enables stuff. But I think it actually maybe what it did buff more than the fair 50-50 deck is the deeper splash, because for instance I think that the K Bombard deck got a big boost when it can get Bombard off with 2 wild and 1 energy now, for instance.
That's a big deal.
Or
the Decay order deck that uses tempo theft and speed.
Yeah, and the old DD deck I used, I mean, had a very straightforward plan of ramping as well. It always ramped up to 3, 4, 5. This was before wild, by the way. It always ramped up to 3, 4, 5 decay before starting dipping into energy, based off the card advantage it got from the decay removal, and usually it was actually even dropped Oblivion Seeker on 5 and then use those cards to drop into energy. And then Wild came, it was a little bit easier to cheat over to energy a couple of turns before that. But the whole thing was really that you had a plan of ramping in one direction, and then you have your splash. Like that, in that case, it was like a 15 card energy, 35 card decay deck playing. So I think those decks were it's better off with the change now. But the 50-50 deck, if you want that in the game, I think it's comparable to power level where it was right now. It's obviously buffed. Don't get me wrong, but I think it's still not. It's still a bit off from being like fully competitive, I think, and I don't know exactly how to solve it.
I totally agree that it's off from being competitive, but I'm also addressing it went in my eyes. It went from being I could not even beat hard AI with my bloody 50-50 decks. Now I can actually sometimes beat competitive decks with my 50-50 decks, but it's not consistent. It's like a 30% win ratio.
So it's like you can make a good solid tier 3 deck, you're thinking, but not like a tier 1 top of the meta deck.
Yeah, that's kind of that kind of thing. And in my opinion, I'm sounding like a broken record here, but I really feel there lies one of the big issues when it comes to multi-resource now, and that is these ramp cards. These ramp cards really need to be looked at, and they need to be reworked.
Absolutely.
Really, really much. Otherwise, we're gonna keep on getting into the issue that every time we start to get multi-resource working, we're gonna get a very heavy removal deck, and then we're gonna do something to make multi-resource to lag behind again.
Yeah.
Because that's always gonna be the first step we're gonna get into.
And just look, I mean, Return to Nature is a perfect example. That scroll has been nerfed how many times now? Like 3 or 4 times, and it is still really, really good, because if it kills one unit, you're getting tremendous card advantage because it gives you a free resource, and resources are worth 2 cards.
I played ED Control on ranked into the top 10, and I'm playing the new version now with Somata Shift on test, and I mean I'm playing 3 copies of that taxing scroll. I'm routinely playing it at like 5-6 cost late game and getting tremendous value out of it. It's just ridiculous. I mean, it scales with the ramp. It scales itself up, so the taxing becomes less of a problem. And that's therein lies one of the issues. I mean, it's just that it's undercosted at the beginning, and then it keeps getting. It's still relevant on turn 24,
right? Which
is not the same case, for instance, with like Tribal Memorial or something like that, where it's like a very fair 1-to-1 scroll. It's a bad draw in the end game, but Return to Nature at that point is usually not a bad draw. So there's a couple of the ones that needs to be still looked at. I'm a little bit surprised that they haven't done more with the old Gravelock Outcast template, where they had like power triggered within the scroll and unlocked if you had that additional resource. They haven't done anything with that template, and I'm a little bit surprised with that, because that means that could catch me up. I could play something that is undercosted for 3 energy, for instance, because I'm getting a little bit more value than I should be with 3, just because I have a second resource available. And that's one way that I could catch up, but because I don't utilize in my energy, my individual scrolls as much, but they are a little bit more powerful than they're supposed to be, just because I'm dipping into the other resources. So I'm a little bit surprised they haven't done more with that.
Well, to be fair, I think that is like a thing you can introduce from time to time, but I don't really think that is a appropriate goal. If we're trying to make a multi-resource deck works by having units like that, we're gonna have very boring design space, because it's gonna be like, we need this unit for this multi-resource and so on. What we want guys like Eager Scryer, who likes countdown increase. That is more broad. How can you countdown increase him? There's several options there. Like, we want more synergy that works with different factions that are more broad like that.
More
That
subtle synergy rather than pay off resource, get awesome advantage.
Yeah, things like Gravelock Outcast and things like Gravehawk, they have a place, but they should not be the what you aim for to make the multi-resource works.
That's a good point, I think.
I like actually that they did introduce some of that with the, for instance, the Lockling and the Wingswarder synergy.
Yeah.
Which is one of those, like, it's there, but it's not written on your nose that it's supposed to be like that. But it's one of the few. I mean, if you look through the spoilers and all that, it's one of the few ways that you can actually protect it, and it's feasible to play them together. I mean, it's just I do definitely agree that I think you're right. I mean, it shouldn't be the only way that they increase the power level of the multi-resource. I'm just surprised that they have that template in the game for I don't know how long. I mean,
and haven't really explored it.
It was in alpha, right? And it's just like that they haven't done more with it. It's just that was a little bit surprising to me, I think. But I definitely agree that they shouldn't need to be so heavy-handed on with the things, and that means also that they need to have clear resource identities. So that you don't have the tools available in the same resources, then there's no reason to splash.
All right. So I'm going to take the opportunity there to check.
The hell is up with my net right now?
I think that one was on my end. My internet hiccuped and I dropped the call on everybody. But since the internet is crashing, this will be a good time to wrap up the show. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I know that
we're going to put in a caller plant in here.
Yeah, I just said call group. Yeah, everybody's in. Yes, thank you everyone for tuning in. I know there's a lot to talk about this week, and we really only touched on the two biggest ones, I feel. There's this news about Judgment. That's a huge deal. There's all these scroll patches that we've seen. That's a huge deal. And I promise we're going to come up to that in the next few shows. Upcoming in the next few weeks, we're going to have a show that I promised last week, actually, about the decks that we predict are going to be good in Waypoints. We're going to talk about the competitive metagame following Waypoints, the changes to all of these scrolls. We also have a dedicated Judgment show coming up where we're going to have some folks on to talk about how to draft well, how to build good decks, and then also talk about changes to the format as a whole, both the ones that have been done and maybe ones we think still need to be done in the future. But anyway, that's our show. Thanks everyone for tuning in. There are a couple of quick things I should plug before I forget. The Brag and Brawl is this weekend, 17:30 GMT tomorrow. That's in about 22 hours or so. Make sure you get your guild involved. We want more than 3 guilds involved, guys.
Yeah.
Get your people together.
Don't make me make my own guild.
This is true. He has threatened this, and he will do it. It's going to be an all-order guild. It's going to be him, Anti-Rad,
it's going to be all-order. It's just going to be me and Punchafalt. As far as I know, the rule says it has to be 5 members. Doesn't say it has to be from 5 different IPs.
This is true. Overlord and his 4 order alts is what it's going to be.
I can play all myself. On my own.
Yeah, so
the order family.
We don't want this happening, so please get your guild together so we don't have to see this travesty unfold. Make sure you check out Twitchmatic's tournament on September 21st. It's going to be super newbie friendly, so check that out. And then the ESL one-on-one ladder is going to be starting soon, so make sure you look into that, see if that's something you're willing to do.
It has already started.
Has it already started? Well, check it out anyway. So yeah, that's our show. Thanks everybody. 3rd time I've said that, but good night.
Good night.
See you guys.
See ya.